I think this painting really encapsulates what the Enlightenment, what neoclassicism is all about. We see learning taking place. We have a lecturer in the center here with the red and black robes giving a demonstration of a scientific instrument called an orrery to a small audience. Let me see, yes, I do have this slide. An orrery, and you see an actual one here, is a mechanical model of the solar system. So each planet is represented by a metal orb, and then a lamp is placed in the middle to represent the sun. The orrery caused a great stir because it replaced the classical subject at the center of the scene, perhaps mythology or history, with one of a scientific nature. Wright's depiction of the awe that's produced by scientific miracles marks a break with previous traditions in which the artistic depiction of such wonder was reserved for religious events. And here, the marvels of the technological age were as awe-inspiring as the subjects of any great religious or mythological painting. I mean, look at the faces of everyone here. We have this kind of overachieving, perhaps a grad student taking notes. We have young children who are just completely transfixed by this amazing machine. All right. We're looking at a group portrait of members of the Royal Academy in London. So the Academy starts in France, and then pretty soon other countries start their own national art academies. And what is interesting here is that we get a little bit of a kind of snapshot of what life is like at the Academy. So we see all these plaster busts of classical sculptures that students would learn to draw from before moving on to live models in figure drawing classes. Now, what's one thing that you notice about this group of people? You might realize that they're all men. There were, in fact, 2 women who were members of the Academy, but women were barred from depicting nudes. They could not attend life drawing classes. This created a huge obstacle in their professional development, and they of course couldn't be included in this group portrait here. So we see their 2 portraits here on the walls, these pictures within a picture of Mary Moser and Angelica Kauffmann. Let's take a look at one of Kauffmann's most important paintings here. She shows us a subject that is drawn from classical antiquity, which is part of what makes this neoclassical. And in the reforming spirit of the Enlightenment, the kind of educational spirit, she depicts a subject that is going to teach us a lesson in virtue. This is the Roman mother Cornelia, who her friend comes over. So Cornelia's here in the middle. Her friend comes over and is showing off all of her jewelry, and she asks, "Hey Cornelia, can I see your jewelry? Can I see your jewels too?" And she shows them her children, and says, "My children are my most precious jewels." So of course Cornelia here, the lesson is that she exemplifies the good mother, and we know from history that her sons grew up to be political reformers in Rome. So we can kind of connect those two. All right. Here's another example of a neoclassical painting that has lessons to teach us. Now, this is highly naturalistic. That is an element of neoclassicism, but there is no attempt to depict the event as it actually happened. What we see here is the death of the British General Wolfe, who was killed in Quebec in 1759 during the 7 Years' War, or what sometimes is called the French and Indian War. Now, England did win that battle, but General Wolfe does not survive. And of course, the underlying purpose here is to present an uplifting moral message of self-sacrifice for the greater good. But of course, we see this completely stylized view of death. Does anybody die on the battlefield with a completely perfectly ironed bright white shirt, no mud, no blood anywhere? We see this perfect, light source here coming down to highlight General Wolfe in the center. We have groups of people looking on, showing us, their respect and their reverence, including this Native American that we see in the bottom left. This might be surprising to us, and this figure is interpreted as the embodiment of an 18th and 19th century concept that is called the noble savage. This is the notion of an indigenous person unencumbered by civilization, kind of nature's gentleman, and the belief that in that state of nature, humans are generally good. So even this Native American coming from a different culture sees General Wolfe and acknowledges the kind of the heroism. Now, of course, the concept of the noble savage is deeply embedded in racism and imperialism. It is still seen within European lens. Europeans still view their culture as vastly superior, but we do see these kind of illustrations of the noble savage in some paintings of the time. Now, this work was highly controversial when it was completed for, again, something that we might find surprising, and that is the choice of contemporary dress. Wolfe wears a simple red coat, the red waistcoat, red breeches, a white shirt. This is typical of the day. Usually what happens in a subject matter that is almost nearly contemporary is that these depictions would still be, the figures would still be depicted in classical garb, and here that is not the case. And people found this to be disrespectful, they found this to be radical, but of course this is what we expect from depictions today, and we would find that choice of classical toga for a near contemporary event to be pretty shocking. Let me just skip ahead here because I want to give you another example of what I'm talking about. So here we see a statue of George Washington that was made for the Virginia State Legislature. It stands in the rotunda of the Virginia State House today. And it's done by a French sculptor, Jean-Antoine Houdon, who was commissioned by French ambassadors Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin. They recommended Houdon come and travel to Mount Vernon, meet Washington, take his measurements, and actually make a mold of his face before then going back to create this commemorative sculpture of Washington, kind of commemorating his wartime service in the Revolutionary War. You see here that he's dressed as a general, and he's portrayed in contemporary dress, as we saw in West's depiction of the death of General Wolfe. Now, there are alternative depictions of George Washington. I mean, look at this. This is so jarring to us today, but this was the stronger convention in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. This image of George Washington almost kind of enthroned as the Greek god of Zeus. We see him bare-chested in a classical toga, classical sandals, really sitting here as Zeus with a very idealized body. It is such a strange depiction for us today, and in fact, this is shown. It wasn't really very well received, and it's been in the Smithsonian collection, kind of on display, sometimes in storage, really since its inception in the 1830s. Okay, the works that I skipped over, I know that the book covers Jacques-Louis David in extensively, and so I want you to make sure that you are aware of David and his contributions to neoclassicism. But I am going to stop the video here, and I know that you guys are responsible and can be accountable for reading about David in the textbook. And then when I come back, I'm going to wrap up this chapter with a discussion of Romanticism.